Hello everyone, welcome back to the AAS YouTube channel. And this is on publishing in the AAS Journals, serving as a referee. This is the 2021 edition of this material. So just to be clear about what journals we're going to be talking about, these are the 7 journals of the AAS. The ones that run reviewing processes are the AJ, APJ Letters, APJ Supplement Series, and the Planetary Journal. Research Notes is moderated, but not refereed, and most articles in the BAAS are not refereed, although there are options if you would like to get a refereed article. So mainly I'm talking about the 4 on the top, and then the Planetary Science Journal. So a critical mission of the AAS Journals is to increase the scientific integrity of the field. And one mechanism that is used to increase that scientific integrity is peer review of submitted manuscripts. And so this is the headline of what comes in on the type of articles that we publish. So our journals specialize in manuscripts presenting significant new results on astronomical observations or theory applied directly to astrophysical systems. And so this might kind of look like boilerplate to you, but it's not, because it kind of has sort of remarkable brevity for what it does and what it does not say. So what it does say is significant new results applied directly to astrophysical systems. So that means that we don't publish review papers, we don't publish comment papers, and things that do come in need to have significant new results. Right? Incremental results don't cut it, so they have to be significant and new. And it's also remarkable for what it does not say. It does not say that, for example, that we only publish correct results. It's not the journal of correct results. There are significant new results. Whether they're correct or not, on the bleeding edge of science, just have to let the scientific process play out, and we see what is correct and not correct as time goes by. Okay, so that's the this is the primary metric for publication in the AAS Journals. So speaking of, let's go ahead and talk about 7 easy pieces. So what is the goal of the peer review process? And then we'll cover these other ones as we get to it. So what is the goal of this peer review process under the metric of significant new results? So the goal of the sometimes intense peer review process, as practiced by the community, is to improve a manuscript and arrive at publication. To improve a manuscript and arrive at publication. Okay? There are certainly other journals out there where this is not the primary metric. This is not the goal of the peer review process. But as practiced by the community in the AAS Journals, it's to improve a paper and arrive at publication. And this is reflected in the acceptance rate for the AAS Journals. It's roughly about 85%. And thus, the peer review process, intense as it may be at times, should be viewed as constructive. Okay? So just a little bit about that 85% acceptance rate. So we receive about 100 new manuscripts each week. And this arrival rate has correlations with proposal deadlines, academic calendars, holidays. On a shorter time scale, there's also the Monday effect. People work on their stuff over the weekend, and then Monday, boom, they do the submissions. So there's always kind of a spike on Mondays of things to do. But there's an ebb and flow through the year, and depending whether you're in the northern hemisphere or southern hemisphere, and we pick all those up in the submission tracking, but of order 100 a week, roughly. Some new submissions are stopped at the gate, and they are not sent out for peer review, and these usually fall into 3 categories. One, it might be a perfectly fine science article, but it's not under the scope of the AAS Journals, which is significant new results applied directly to astrophysical systems. So just to give an example of what that means, and I don't mean to pick on any particular field, I'm just mentioning some that I do see. And these would be what would be purely plasma physics papers. probably a great plasma physics paper, but it's just a plasma physics paper. It doesn't attempt to apply its results directly to astrophysical systems. And going back to the metric, it's significant results applied directly to astrophysical systems. So those usually don't go out for peer review. Also in that metric, as I mentioned, we don't do comment papers, we don't do review papers, but that doesn't stop people from submitting them, and so those are stopped. And then, of course, you do get the articles that are euphemistically not suitable for publication in any science journal, and we'll just leave those alone. So manuscripts that do enter the peer review process are then checked with a text overlap tool. Okay, so don't be duplicating your text, or goodness, someone else's text. That would be an ethics violation. Manuscripts with a significant statistical component are reviewed by the AAS statistics editor, and manuscripts with a software data component are previewed by the AAS data editors. And these are a couple of things that we do to help also ensure the scientific integrity of the manuscripts coming in. So got a lot of statistics, checked. Got some software data, checked. And then we always check to make sure it's original prose. Okay. Once those checks are done, a scientific editor is then assigned, who does basically 4 things. So 1 is they choose the referee. Number 2 is they supervise the peer review process. Number 3, they adjudicate any impasses between referees. And then they make the final accept and reject decision. Okay? And you'll notice I put referees in plural because sometimes, and in some fields, it's standard to use more than one referee. For example, the Planetary Science Journal, by mandate, will have 2 referees per manuscript. Some fields, laboratory astrophysics, for example, will routinely use 2 referees on a manuscript. In the ones that I handle in the high energy physics and fundamental physics corridor, 10–15% will usually have 2 referees, so it's not unheard of to have multiple referees, although in general we use 1, and we'll get back to that. So the scientific editor is expected to have a general knowledge of the subject material of the manuscript, and the referee is expected to be an expert in the field. Okay. So who is this expert in the field? Who is the referee? So we consider every publishing author as a potential referee, subject to some boundary conditions, to some constraints. So we want a subject matter expert, usually at the post-PhD level. Not entirely. For example, I will on occasion use senior level graduate students if they have published a couple papers in a topic, and I'm not adverse to using them. If it is their first review, I will typically ask that they have their initial report gone over by a veteran of the peer review process, e.g. their thesis advisor. And then we have a number that are objectivity concern based when seeking and securing a referee. Not somebody who's been a previous co-author within a reasonable time frame with the authors. You know, if you wrote a paper 20 years ago, okay, that might be fine. If you wrote one 6 months ago, that's probably not okay. Certainly not someone from the same institution. That can get awkward all the way around, particularly if the initial report is negative. Certainly not someone known to be a mortal enemy, and every field has its subfield, has its protagonist and enemies. So unless you like really long review processes, arduous ones, try not to choose somebody who's known to be a mortal enemy, although you do step in minefields on occasion. It does happen. Not someone who is known to be a close acquaintance, so we try and avoid the family and friends plan, so avoid that. And so referees are also expected, so this is sort of an ethical issue, to reveal potential conflicts of interest. We can't keep track of everybody who was a grad student or a postdoc of somebody as they move around and go through their trajectory. So if you do have a conflict of interest, the person was your postdoc, or you were a graduate student of this person, you should certainly say so. But a conflict of interest is not working generally in the same field, right? I will get people who say they have a conflict of interest because they work, just to pick a field, they work in stars. Well, okay, but that's not a conflict of interest. That's the expertise we're looking for, is you work in stars, so you'll have some expertise in that. But generally claiming a conflict of interest based on some broad topic is not a conflict of interest. Okay. So when the scientific editor has selected potential referees, that's when securing the referee begins. And securing a referee can take a while, so authors be patient, please. And there are a few reasons why it can take a while to secure a referee. So number one, we're just all busy, particularly in this era of the pandemic, which is when I'm shooting this on January 27th, 2021. And a quality report, we're going to get to that quality, takes time. And sometimes you just don't have the time to do it, and it's perfectly fine to say no. Specialized manuscripts that have very small communities, or at the other extreme, you have very large collaboration manuscripts. Looking at you, gravitational waves and cosmic rays, experimentals. May subsume most of the community, and so it can be really challenging to find a review. For example, just pick on one for LIGO Virgo papers where they slurp up just about everybody. So those can have a little bit of a challenge too, and it just takes time. And other factors enter in, such as unbeknownst to the recipient of the email, it could be their internet service provider, it could be their spam, junk, or trash filters imposed by that service provider, and these also come into the game. But if you are asked to be a referee, it's an honor to be asked to serve the community as a referee. They, after all, have reviewed your papers that came in, and so you should reciprocate that and be honored that you're even asked, because you're being asked based on your expertise and your publication. And so in some sense, you have arrived in that at least the scientific editor thinks that your expertise is worthwhile applying. So do it when you can. So when you receive a referee request, you should ask yourself 3 questions before making a decision if you can do it. Number 1, am I an expert? Do you know the topic well enough to assess the novelty of the research? And by novelty here, I mean the primary metrics, significant new results of the research. The quality of the research, is this top tier material or not? And the impact and importance of the research, is this an incremental result? Is this a significant new result that's going to push the field forward? Your ability to assess that. And if the answer to any of these questions is no, then tell the scientific editor that you decline. You can say why you're declining, and while you're declining, it's also useful if you can suggest other referees who may be an expert in the topic to pick it up. The second question to ask yourself is, will I be able to meet the due date? Some reports take longer than others depending on the complexity of the manuscript. Usually a 5-page manuscript is easier to write a report on than a 45-page manuscript. And authors, of course, will want their report as soon as possible. And you can think about your own behavior on your own manuscripts, how quickly you want a report. And it's perfectly okay as a referee to ask for more time if you need it, even if it's up front. So, for example, I may have, or a potential referee may have a grant proposal that's due in a week, and so, okay, I can't get started this week, can you give me one more week? Sure. Usually it's almost always yes. Or alternatively, once you've started the review and you find, oh boy, this manuscript's way deeper or bigger than I thought it was, and so just talk to your scientific editor and say, may I please have another week? This thing is long, or it's hard, or I need to do some background research on this. Fine, perfectly good. Just ask for more time if you need it. Okay. And the third question to ask is, do I have a conflict of interest? So if you are a colleague of the authors, helped with the research, or feel that you might be in direct competition, then just let the scientific editor know. And this is an ethics concern, and so you should raise it. So I laughed a little bit about help with the research because, let's see, I have had manuscripts come in, and I select potential referees, and I reach out to one of them to be the referee on the paper, and this potential referee comes back and says, hey, I should have been author on this paper because I did X, Y, and Z. It's like, oh, really? Okay. So usually that leads to the potential referee getting in touch with the corresponding author of the manuscript. They have a discussion, and usually the corresponding author comes back and says, oops, my bad. Yes, this person should have been on the manuscript. And so it does happen. So do raise those conflict of interest when they come up, okay? As we're talking a little bit about ethical responsibilities here, if you've got a conflict of interest, and the other, I think, is the ethical responsibility of just participating in the community that reviews your manuscripts. Turnabout is fair play in this game. And number two, a potential referee is a privileged reader who has access to confidential information. Not everybody posts their submission on preprint servers when it comes time, and so it could be, and it often is, that you are looking at material that is not publicly available, and therefore it's confidential. And in particular, what you get is the abstract, and that may contain enough information for a potential referee to decide if they're going to accept or decline the referee invitation. It can also convey enough information for an unethical person to abuse the process and try and publish first. This rarely happens, but it does happen. I was just reading a case this morning where, not astronomy for goodness sakes, another field where an author submitted a paper. Went a couple rounds on the review process. The authors decided to withdraw the paper and submit it elsewhere, and much to the author's surprise, a month later, a very similar plagiarized manuscript was submitted that contained, 40% of 50% of their words, and then 30% just mild adjustments. So that is definitely an ethical. Oh, and the author of this would happen to be the editor of the journal. So, ooh, ouch, really bad. I'm unaware of any cases that has happened in astronomy, so that's good. So let's keep it that way, people, please. Okay. So globally, order of magnitude, there's about 10,000 astronomers in the world globally, and everybody publishes on average about one paper a year, and so there's at least 10 to the 4th articles per year. There are a couple of top-tier astronomy journals, physics journals, engineering journals, and software journals that send out referee requests. And so the number of referee requests is usually larger for more visible researchers. So if you're publishing 10 papers a year, odds on you're going to see more referee requests than somebody who publishes once every 2 years or so, in general. And so you just might be too busy if you're publishing 10 a year to handle every referee request. You should handle a couple. We're going to come to that. And so I just want to get the point across that that the securing of a referee is not a random process. There is a lot of thought behind it. There is some selection, but there is a stochastic element to it. Right? Who is available? Who can do a good job? Who's an expert? Who can turn something in on time given the other constraints? So, not random, but definitely a stochastic element to it. And so this, I've alluded to this a couple times, is how often should I referee? Okay, answer, twice a year. Okay, if everybody did twice a year, the load balance would be good. Things would move along at a pretty good clip. So you should aim to do it at least twice a year. There are some people who really enjoy refereeing, and they do it much more than a year. And just put little statistics on that. Here you go. So this is on the x-axis here is the number of reviews per year. So this is on the upper end of the distribution of referees for the AAS journals. And on the y-axis is the number of referees. So for example, there's roughly about, at least in this time period between 2016 and 2019, there's roughly about 45 referees who will handle double what we encourage. They handle 4 reviews per year. Thank you very much for those people. I'm not going to name names, of course. And then this is the very tail end of the distribution. And yes, we do have one referee who handles 16 manuscripts a year. They really like refereeing, and they're good at it. And so that's at the extreme tail end. And you can see sort of the tailing off here. But there are certainly people that do more than the recommended 2, but please try and do 2 a year to help the community move along. Okay. And then there is the other end. So we just looked at the high end of the distribution. Then there's the low end of the distribution. And there is the occasional author who refuses to participate in the community as a referee. And I find this rather singularly uncollegial. Manuscripts by those authors consume the community's time and effort and resources in reviewing their papers, and not to reciprocate that, the image there says it all. That's a sad situation. Okay, so try not to be one of those. On the other hand, it's rewarding when a referee accepts and provides a quality report. We're going to get to that quality report here in a minute, and expresses happiness, joy for helping to contribute to the community. That gets the opposite meter on the green happy face there on the bottom. Okay. So how do you write a good referee report? And a good referee report usually is done in 2 steps. Number 1 is preparing to write the report. We'll talk about that next. And then actually writing the report. So I'm going to break this up into 2 sections. So first is preparing to write the report. So if you have agreed to review a manuscript, I want you to keep the following 3 guidelines in mind. As you read the manuscript, you're not writing anything yet, you're just reading it. And this will help you provide an on-time and quality report. Okay. Is the work novel and interesting? This gets back to the primary metric of the AAS Journal, significant new results applied directly to observations or theory. So are there significant new results? If there aren't, okay, note that. Do the authors adequately explain why the work is novel? Okay. It can help when you're writing your papers, typically this is done at the end of introduction, to explicitly say, why is this a significant new result? So don't leave it to the reader or the referee to try and guess what the significant new results are. Say what it is. Okay. Have parts of the manuscript been published before? Is this a rehash of material from 20 years ago? Is it a conglomeration of recent material and a hot topic? So do note that. How relevant is the work to other researchers in the field? Right? So if you've got a manuscript that looks like it might benefit just the author, that's not wide enough. We would like to have a broader impact on the community than just one person. And getting back to the first one, is it only an incremental advance over previous work? So, for example, again, not to pick on anything, the days of being able to write an article with the discovery of one new exoplanet is probably come and gone. Although there are exceptions to that. And so a paper submitted, unfortunately you rarely see them these days, but they did have a tail there, where people would, discovery of one exoplanet, and so that was worth a publication. So that would be an incremental advance these days, but like I said, there are exceptions. For example, if there was a single planet detection of Earth 2.0, that would be a significant new result. And hopefully you publish in the AAS Journals. Okay, so is the work novel and interesting? Number 2, is the work understandable and correct? And we'll get to what correct means here in a minute. Is it clear what the authors are trying to achieve within an article? Are there sufficient references to provide background and put the work in context? So this is usually done in the introduction, but also as you go through in the results. Are the results backed up with evidence? Are there unsupported claims? You just saying something that is not supported by the figures or the data that is being taken. And by correct, I don't necessarily mean correct in a scientific sense, right? We're not the Journal of Correct Results, okay? But are there errors? Are there flaws? Are there mistakes in the analysis? Is the mathematics correct? Is the statistics correct? So it's perfectly fine to make an assumption or two and go with them. And within that framework is what you're doing correct and going forward. And so lastly, do you understand the work? Right? If you can't understand the work, then the authors are not being clear, and you need to bring that up when you get to writing the report. Okay? And the third thing to keep in mind as you're going over the article is the work well presented. Does the title reflect the contents of the manuscript? Sometimes titles seem to go off on a tangent relative to what the main work is. You should note that. Does the abstract contain the essential information for the article, right? The abstract is like the trailer of a movie. And so does that trailer adequately describe what the movie is about? Sometimes, most of the time it does, sometimes it doesn't. So you should note that. Are the figures and tables correct? Are they informative? Are there too many figures? Are there too few figures? Are they too small? I particularly note those that come in and the figures are like the size of postage stamps, so you can barely make out it's below the Rayleigh criteria reading the axes. Are the figures too large? Do you have this full page figure that is blank or is one straight line? So note that as you're reading through it. Do the conclusions summarize what has been learned and why the significant new results are interesting? Right? So just doing a dump of the results, I did some observations, bloop, I ran some simulations, bloop, okay, fine, now interpret them. What are the conclusions you get out of that? So what have we learned? Is the language clear? That's a good fraction of back and forth in referees, is the clarity of the language. And is the manuscript an appropriate length? Is it too short? Does it need to be expanded by a few pages to explain, for example, better interpretation or more caveats to the analysis? Or is it too long? I've certainly had articles come in were 16, 20, 30 pages, and part of the report was a suggestion to split the paper. I'd say roughly about half the time, authors will take that suggestion and go, yeah, that's a good idea. We should split it into two, talk about this in one, talk about this in the other. So you're looking for appropriate length. And sometimes 30 pages is an appropriate length. That's perfectly fine. But keep that in mind as you read the article. Okay, so those are the three things to keep in mind as you go through the article. Now, and only now, is it time to write the report. Okay, and so let's talk about some of the elements of what writing a good report looks like. First thing, you should start your report by summarizing the purpose and the results of the manuscript. This demonstrates to the authors and to the scientific editor that you have read and that you understand the work. And I giggle because I can't tell you how many times you get the angry author response that the referee clearly did not read my paper and didn't understand it. That's almost always not the case. And you help that by writing that first part. What is this paper about, and what results does it get? Okay, so start your report out by giving a very high-level summary of what's going on. And so you should also give your opinion within this opening if the manuscript presents significant new results. Again, we keep coming back to this primary metric for publication in the AAS Journals. Significant new results on observations of theory applied directly to astrophysical systems. You should say that in your report. So that usually goes in the top blurb. High-level summary, does or does not, might present significant new results. Okay. And now as you start writing on the specific points, you want to say what is interesting or good about the manuscript. Referee reports need not always all the time be negative or critical. It's very rare to have a manuscript that is all bad. Does happen, rarely. But usually there are some good points about a manuscript or things that are interesting. And so you should feel comfortable saying what is good or interesting about the manuscript. And when you do criticize a manuscript, you need to be specific in that criticism. Don't just say, this result is wrong. Okay, that doesn't help anybody. That's okay. Say why it is wrong and back up that criticism with evidence. And that evidence can come from the literature. 15 people have gotten result A. These authors get result B. Why? Okay. Give counter examples. Plenty of those. Well, here's a system that violates the results of the manuscript, so how does this fit in? Clearly mathematical errors need to be flagged. Those do happen. Mostly typos, but on occasion somebody makes an actual oopsie, and that then gets corrected. Again, the goal of the peer review process is to improve a manuscript and bring it to publication. So if improving that manuscript means finding mathematical errors, we definitely want those corrected. Okay. So in a report, don't be vague or unspecific about the changes that are needed to bring a manuscript to the required quality standards for publication, if you think the manuscript should be published. Be very clear about what changes are required, okay, or necessary. The authors need to make figure 1 bigger. I can't read the axis labels, or whatever it may be. But be very clear about what the changes are. There are a few things less frustrating in a report where it's critical, but it's not really clear what the authors are supposed to be doing in response. So be clear about what it is you are suggesting, commenting on that the authors do. Okay. Please provide full references to earlier work if you believe the research does not add anything new. And don't just say Smith et al. 2018, Wang et al. 2020. Those are just impossible to track down, and we're not mind readers on what the particular field might be, particularly if there's a very common surname for the author. So be specific, say APJ 194-361 2017. I don't know what article that is, but give a full reference. Detail references that the authors neglected to include, or any references that are inaccurate. For example, there will be manuscripts come in where perhaps they should have done a little better literature search, so you can help be constructive in that, and say the author should consider adding references A, B, and C. Sometimes references are put in that have nothing to do with the topic at hand. Don't know how those got worked in. So go ahead and mention those as well. Article X is referenced, but it's about topic Y, and this paper is about subject Z. Doesn't seem to make sense. Flag those in your report. On the other hand, I do want to stress that the referee is not the author of the paper or seeking to be co-author on the paper. And so you really want to avoid in your report saying that the authors must include references and then list off 10 of your articles. That's just poor practice. Trying to enforce authors to cite your work. That's not cool, so don't do that. Or the other one is insisting that authors must discuss unrefereed, unpublished manuscripts. You know, I saw something at a conference proceeding, and the authors must discuss this conference proceeding. No, that's not good. Try and keep it within the published literature, professional published literature. Okay. In all cases, please be civil, professional, and polite in your report. Even if the report is critical of the paper, you can still be civil, professional, and polite. Do not make, imply, or insinuate personal comments or criticize the authors as individuals. Okay? Review the research, not the researcher. Okay? So reports that do come in that are uncivil, unprofessional, or not polite will either be redacted if that's possible, or the scientific editor will decide that's not even worth the time, and will go seek somebody who can be civil, professional, and polite. So be nice. Is the English understandable? Now, you don't need to correct every spelling or grammatical error in the manuscript. Really bad ones, you should note it. The copy editing, should it get to that stage, will generally pick up typos, grammar, which, that, and pick those up. But it is definitely helpful when the language is obscuring the scientific meaning or the scientific implication. So if you run into those cases, you should definitely raise those in your report. And finally, you should make a recommendation. You're asked for it. And currently, I say currently, we offer 3, accept as is, revise, and reject. Probably you're going to see some clarification on what reject means, because some referees will take that to mean reject this version, because it's clear from their report that they're being constructive, and so what they interpret that reject being is it's not ready for publication. So yeah, you're going to see some clarifications over the next, I'd say, year on exactly what these terms mean with respect to the AAS journals. And don't be wimpy by clicking accept and saying something like, let the community decide, in order to give perhaps a favorable impression on work is weak. Be bold. If it's not up to snuff to be in the AAS journals, don't be scared to say so. Because ultimately it is the scientific editor that makes the decision, and we'll go back to that. So be bold, say what it is. And so our goal is to receive your report within 3 weeks, although it's 10 days for an APJ letter. They, of course, move on a quicker time scale. That's part of the value add for APJ letters, is the rapid turnover of you agreeing to provide a review. And it's a sad fact that some referees have been known to disappear at this stage. It's just bad behavior. You agreed to do it, and just to disappear like that is just not cool. So yeah, don't do that. Get your report in on time. Or if you need more time, ask the scientific editor for more time. It's perfectly fine, but just don't go radio silent, disappear. So referees are anonymous by default, and if a referee wishes to waive anonymity, and some do, and if the scientific editor agrees, and do get that permission, then usually direct correspondence between the authors and the referee is still forbidden. And I won't say usually, I'll say always, because the journals have to be in that loop between authors and referees. Right? Don't want some secret side conversation going on some agreement or resolution, and the scientific editor has no clue what's going on, and all of a sudden the report went from very negative to the next one being it's the greatest thing since ice cream. Well, what happened? So, perfectly fine to request anonymity. Just ask for it. Don't assume it. Okay, and that gives me 3 things to remember. Keep it confidential. Do not contact the authors. And perhaps most importantly, review the research, not the researcher. Okay. And this will bring us to number 6 on 6 easy pieces, 7 easy pieces. So what service does a referee provide? Okay, so you've gone through the trouble, you've said yes, you've read the article, you've written a report, and what service does this supply to the community? So usually you're not supposed to share referee reports, but I'll share one with you because it's not going to give anything away. So here is the most singular referee report that I ever handled. Here was the report. No. Remarkable brevity, one must admit, and it's unclear to me why capitalization of the N was necessary when a period at the end was deemed not. So this is an example of a not good report. Okay. Obviously, I went back to this particular referee and said this isn't going to cut the cake. You need to be a little more specific. And eventually they were. Took a little prying, but eventually got one. So yeah, that's not a good report. Single word. So a good referee report, which is a good fraction of this discussion here, serves both the authors and the scientific editors. For the authors, it provides an independent, critical reading of the manuscript. And a good report suggests improvements, okay? Advises contractions of material, expansions of material. It flags weak or unstated assumptions, and it notes sloppy or nebulous presentations. And again, this is usually done as practiced by the community in a constructive fashion, 85% acceptance rate. Okay, so keep it thoughtful, keep it constructive, and these are the services that it provides to the authors. For the scientific editor, a good report signals where there may be problems. For example, duplicate submission to another journal. That's an ethics violation there, and it does happen. People will shop their manuscript to 2 journals at once, and that'll get you in trouble with both journals. Almost all journals have, you can't submit it to multiple journals at once. You can submit it to a journal, and if that peer review process turns out to be a decline to publish, then you're free to take it to another journal. But putting in 3 or 4 journals at once and seeing which one comes first is definitely an ethics violation. And I have had people mention this, so if you're an author, don't do it. A good report will signal text overlap, like, gee, this section 4 looks an awful lot like this manuscript over here. That's an ethical one, so that helps. Improper citation or misrepresentation of the literature is a signal of a potential problem there. Redundancies, including incremental extensions of insignificant significance. You know, I twisted one parameter in some multi-D simulation, and here's a whole new article. That's probably not going to meet the metric of significant new results, and so that needs to be raised. And then just basic errors. Had trouble integrating function, or a statistical error in their Bayesian statistics, or things along those lines. So a good report is going to bring some of these issues up, and those usually get attention from the scientific editor. So a good report, like I have said, is it also says what is positive. It's not always criticism. So it does say what is positive, and it will flag potential issues that sometimes can lead to some extensive iteration and discussion between referee and authors. So you should know that any report is read by the scientific editor before being sent to the authors. And the scientific editor may ask the referee to clarify their recommendation. You said reject, but your article or your report suggests otherwise. So they may ask to just clarify the recommendation or points raised in the report. If something's not clear, for example, you get one of those, this result is wrong, and there's no backup, no evidence of why it might be wrong, then probably you're going to be asked to clarify what this item in your report. So the scientific editor does read the reports before they go. And again, I'm harping on this. A good report is civil, professional, and reviews the research, not the researcher. And if a report is uncivil, too strong, or the language is poor, it will be redacted or edited by the scientific editor. And if it's too bad, not salvageable, then you just move on to a different reviewer. So, there. So on average, good reports range from a few paragraphs to perhaps several pages in length. The primary metric is quality of the report, not length. Okay. I've handled reports that ranged from one word, that's the bad report I mentioned earlier, so those are no good, to reports that are even longer than the manuscript that they review. Sometimes that's okay. Sometimes it's not, depends on the length of the manuscript, but the important part is the quality of the report, not length. So don't think that all reports need to be 2 pages and you're just fluffing stuff out. Oftentimes good reports are just 4 or 5 paragraphs, boom, done, gets everything in there. So aim for quality, take the time to make that quality report. And closure is usually reached after about 2 or 3 iterations. This is totally normal on a time scales of months. Oftentimes that time scale is driven by the time scale it takes authors to reply and revise their manuscript in response to the report. But 2 to 3 times is totally normal. Sometimes it goes on longer than that. Sometimes even after 3, it's clear there's going to be a stalemate or an impasse, and it's the scientific editor's discretion. They may seek another referee on their own. They may grant an author's request for another referee, so authors can request, and remember it's a request, not a right. Or the scientific editor just may, I've seen enough, I'm going to make a decision. That's perfectly within their purview. So if another referee is sought, they're usually asked for their independent review. Give me a clean sheet, no matter what you may be able to see or glean from the manuscript of previous reviews, give me a clean sheet review of it. Sometimes the second referee is informed about the nature of the impasse that happened with the first one. So if there's particular items the scientific editor would like some clarity on from a second referee, they will sometimes raise that. That's fine too. And scientific editors serve as the arbitrators, the mediators, and eventually as judges in the peer review process. And referees provide input, critical input, into that decision process. And this is one of the primary services that a referee provides to the community through the scientific editor on the publications. Okay. And finally, I just want to get to a few summary do's and don'ts of things to do. So do send your report on or before the agreed deadline. Contact the scientific editor if you're going to be late. Contact the scientific editor if you have any questions. There's a figure missing, there's a file missing. Any questions whatsoever, feel free to contact the scientific editor. Say what is important, novel, or significant about the manuscript that you're reading. Give examples to make your meaning clear, particularly if it's a counterexample on why this doesn't particularly fit the manuscript's model or interpretation of the data. Be unbiased and objective. Review the research, not the researcher. And give your recommendation. Accept, revise. Be clear about that. Don't be wimpy on that. Do not do nothing. If you're unwilling to review a manuscript, just say so. One of the real flamers is agree to provide a report, but then fail to send it. If you need more time, ask for more time. But don't say yes and then don't do it. That's yuck. Okay. Don't contact the authors. Okay. Ask the scientific editor to forward any questions you might have, any clarifications you need from the manuscript. Don't make any claims about manuscripts without providing evidence, explanation of why this particular thing might not be as precise as it can be, or in some cases outright wrong. Do not personally criticize the authors, okay? And don't make a recommendation without giving a reason, okay? Reject. Report? No. Okay, that's not good enough. Okay, and if you do all these things, you will be a good referee, you will be writing good reports, and you will be contributing to the community of authors, referees, and scientific editors as we work through this machinery to ensure scientific integrity of the manuscripts that are published in the AAS Journals. That's what I had to say for 2021's version of this material, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Bye-bye.